In this lesson, we'll learn the processes for animating and setting keyframes within RealFlow. Okay, so within RealFlow, we really have the ability to not just simply rely on basic dynamic simulation, we also have the ability to set basic keyframes for a lot of different parameters. So for example, if we open up the scene file, this is called lesson 08 start. If I were to come in here and press the A key on my keyboard, you can see that we have just this very, very simple square emitter. And I have this set up to just emit some particles. We have things like gravity that's pulling these down. And I also have set up an age daemon just to make sure that these particles actually die at a certain age. Now, what I'd like to do is actually animate this little sphere. And again, this is just created using our sphere primitive. I'd like to actually animate this moving through our water. So let's go ahead and press Control A on our keyboard to get this back. So what I'm going to do is be keyframing my movement. So with this, I'll go ahead and grab my Move tool and take my sphere and move that back. Now with the sphere selected, if I go ahead and expand this node here, again we have things like position, rotation, and scale. If I were to select something like my position and then right-click on that, you can see I can actually come in and start to do things like set keys, remove keyframes if I already have something set. I can do that for the position as a whole, or I can actually do that for the X, Y, or Z axes individually. So in my case, since I'm only moving this along the Z axis, I'll go ahead and just add a key for that. You can see that once a keyframe has been set, that we have sort of this orange, kind of a rust color that indicates that we do have some animation now. So I'll go ahead and move this forward to maybe frame 40 or 50 and pull the sphere forward. And now at this point, once again, right-click on position and add key. So now what we should see is if I scrub through my timeline, we have this little sphere that is moving through. And if I were to press the A key on my keyboard, we should actually see this little sphere moving through here. It splashes through the water and then comes to a rest. Now, obviously, this is a very, very low resolution fluid, so we really don't have very detailed splashes as this comes through. But if we wanted to, we could easily just start to bump up our resolution and start to get something that looks a little bit nicer. Now, we can keyframe more than just simply the movement of objects. We can also start to keyframe things like the speed or some of the randomization of our particle emitters. So let's say, for example, once our sphere gets past a certain point, that we basically want our little waterfall back here to turn off and stop emitting particles. So to do that, if we scroll down, let's go ahead and take this and open up that square tab. Now, if you recall from one of the earlier lessons, I had mentioned that the speed is really what controls the rate of our particle emission. So if we set our speed down to 0, essentially that will turn our fluids or our particle emissions off. So if I were to come in here and right-click and add a key for my speed, again we can see that we have sort of this rust color that indicates that we have some animation. And now I can go forward 1 or 2 frames, take my speed, set that down to 0, right-click, and make sure I add a key for that. So now if I scrub through my timeline, we can see where at this point, around frame 40, I have my speed set to 2. If I proceed forward a few frames, you can see now my speed is set to 0. So now if I were to come back, we could either go back a few frames or start our simulation all over again. In my case, since I really haven't changed any of these major attributes, I can come in and just re-simulate from this point. Yep, in that case, that didn't seem to work out very well. So you can see I actually had a little bit of an explosion of some particles up here. So let's go ahead and just be on the safe side and set that back. And all of a sudden my emitter is really, really wide. Let's scroll down here, and looks like I actually have my side emission. I had accidentally clicked on that and set it to yes. By default, that's actually supposed to be set to no. There we go, much better. So now with my side emission turned off, you can see here's my sphere that's moving through here. Once we get up to about frame 45, you can see my speed now gets set to 0, which means my waterfall basically turns off. Alright, so again, just a very, very quick playback. Now, in addition to just having our simple keyframes, we also have full access to our animation curves. So if I wanted to, at any point in time, maybe just adjust the movement or the animation curves for this, we can come in here to our sphere in this case. I'll go ahead and take my position Z, and now open curve. So here we can actually see the animation curve as my movement along the Z-axis starts to increase. So if we needed to, we could actually take any of these values and actually start to move these up or down, and actually start to change the movement and the position of this object along that Z-axis. We should actually be able to see those changes happening as we start to move this animation curve around. We can also come in and start to set some definite values over here. So here we have our actual frame value for that keyframe that we have selected, and here we actually have the value itself. Now we can actually click on these and just simply left click and drag. So if I had this set to exactly frame 40, and I wanted to get in here and start to do some very, very precise adjustment, I could just come in here, take this slider, and really, again, just use that like a slider. So I can come in here and start to move my mouse up or down and get that positioned exactly where I want. And we can also come in here and use this to basically add keys, adjust keyframe tangencies, things like that. Really anything that you would be able to do as far as animation with any of our major 3D applications. Now, really, we can, again, come in and RealFlow will allow us to place animation keyframes on really just about anything. Now, when it comes to actually animating things like the resolution or animating things like pressure, viscosity, really I would say to do that at your own risk, because once RealFlow has started the simulation with these based on certain values, changing those values mid-animation or actually having these values start to update themselves can start to lead to some very, very erratic behavior, maybe even some crashing on the part of RealFlow. So again, while RealFlow will allow you to set keyframes on things like this, I would typically recommend against doing something like that. Okay, so that's a look at how we can start to take advantage of some of the keyframing and animation features found within RealFlow.